You build a technology and you find its limits, and it's better to have a bad technology than no at all. That's the spirit that's going on there at the moment, right? Do something rather than doing nothing is something which is reinforcing the mindset in the drone ecosystem. Because why did we build Cochstedt? With the same idea in mind. You can't develop everything in a computer.
Hey Space Watchers, and welcome back to Space Café Radio. Today, from an area that is not very often served by us, we will talk today mainly about drones. And the reason is that today, the 8th of December 2025, marks the inauguration of the DLR National Drone Research Center in Cochstedt near Magdeburg in the middle of Germany in Sachsen-Anhalt. And that's a major step for Germany's aeronautics, security, architecture and technological ambitions. And I have the great pleasure to sit together with Daniel Suelberg, the head of the new center. Daniel, how are you doing today?
Yeah, good, fine. Yourself?
Great. Yeah, me too. Hey, I made it to Cochstedt. First time in my life. So it's
out of the way, hey?
Yeah, absolutely. From your operational and strategic perspective, why did Germany need such a center now? What are the drivers?
I think when we really founded the test center 5 years ago, the driver was a little bit different, but it's essentially the same as today, because we realized that the time from having an idea to being able to test it for the first time is way too long. So back then, it was around 12 to 18 months for companies and also research projects until they found the right site, had the right approvals and so on and so forth to actually flight test their drones or equipment or whatever. So the essential purpose of Cochstedt is to shorten that time span. Over the last 4 years, of which we are now already in operation, I think the point was to reduce that down to 6 months. The main limiting factor having been that you need an operational authorization from the Federal Air Safety Bureau, Luftverbundesamt. So now, due to this new geozone, which has now been implemented and talked a lot about today, which is a new part of the test center, we can shorten the time span even more from 6 months to a couple of weeks, because now we can do the same tests, but without any approval.
You just mentioned the geozone. What does it mean and what is a big deal about it?
What I would say we did together with the government, because we can't decide to do that ourselves. So our Ministry of Transport was really the key player here and the key enabler. Was that there is a part in the European drone regulation that allows for the establishment of geozones with, I would say, a permit for special use, because usually you have different categories of drones. And if you are below 25 kilos within line of sight and need to fulfill some other criteria as well, you can fly without any permit, I would say. And that's usually what's going on in testing, because it's a modified drone and then you're already out of the open category. You want to fly as far as possible usually, and you want to fly fast, you want to fly bigger drones. You need to have an operational authorization by the state authority. And the geozone gives you a way not around that, because you still have the risk analysis that you need to do, but it's a pre-done risk analysis. So now we have negotiated, I would say, with the German government, a set of privileges which everybody else can use, which is not a singular operational authorization for one company, one research project or so on and so forth. But it's a generally usable airspace privilege that we can then make available for our own research projects at DLR, but also people from the industry, from the police, the military, and so on and so forth.
That means that the responsibility is now on your shoulders and not on the government for giving this permission. So you have to decide what can be tested or not. Or can I come with my drone here and fly around as well?
Yeah, so there's a clear set of rules what can and can't be done, right? For example, we have a very large airspace, which is around 16 by 5 kilometers in Germany, super large airspace to fly drones in, that can be used for drones up to 600 kilos. But there is a limitation in the speed that you can then have. While we have a smaller separate area within the geozone, which is about 5 by 5 kilometers, where you can fly drones up to 2 tons of weight, also with a lot faster velocity. And so we need to see in which like part of the airspace or geozone to fit people into with their project. But we have, I would say, generated a whole portfolio of possible testing scenarios, which have then to find their way into the geozone.
Yeah. Why don't you lead us in these different missions that you have in mind? So what concrete, call it mission profiles, are at the core of the center today?
I think as already hopefully became clear during the event, because we had the 3 panels with 3 thematic pillars of the research that's been conducted here. So the first pillar is the drone technology itself. So there's new drone prototypes that need to be flown to just gain experience and data on how to develop this further. Then the second pillar is what we mainly subsume in the realm of airspace integration. So meaning on the one hand, which is why we are located in an operational airport, right? The key element of drones is to integrate them into normal airport operations at some stage. And the one is integrating them into the flights that are actually taking place. But the other thing is also integrating them into the operational handbooks and so on and so forth. But the main research part is not, that's like a sideshow that we do here in Cochstedt. The main research part of all the other customers that are coming here in our DLR projects is digitizing the airspace. And that can be achieved for drones and built for drones rather easily. So we've heard the, I would say, word U-Space, which is the European regulation to build digital drone airspaces. Although Patrick Key, the former head of EASA, last time I heard him speak, said that from EASA point of view, he wouldn't rule out that the digitized U-Space environment might also be upgraded into the normal operational aircraft management at some stage, right? And so therefore, the drone ecosystem is an enabler also to make the normal aircraft operations more efficient, and so on and so forth. And part 3 is basically the security applications. And that's ranging all the way from counter-UAS technologies to specific mission profile-based prototypes and so on and so forth. And so it's always a little bit either one to the extreme, or we also have projects that take into account 2 or 3 of all those aspects at the same time.
When we talk about integration of drones into the normal airspace, then we talk about civil applications for disaster recovery, transport logistics, something in that area, so that I can get my next Amazon package via a drone, for instance. What is not likely, but something like that. One thing that triggered me earlier was, you said we come from research times from 1.5 years down to potentially weeks now. Urgency in the drone development is something that we learn, because one trigger, and that was hardly said that today here, but is definitely what we see at the battlefield in the Ukraine. Yeah, these really fast moving processes, reiterating processes of innovation. So is that something where you also learn from? What to do? Not bring the battlefield to Cochstedt, not meaning that, but the fast iterative processes that are behind, where we obviously as Germany or as Bundeswehr can learn from.
Yeah, from a research perspective at DLR, we are not directly involved in anything that's going on in the Ukraine, right? So we are also not in direct contact with the industry that is involved there. So there's no direct exchange or benefit. But I would say the idea behind it, which is learning by failing, really. You build a technology and you find its limits, and it's better to have a bad technology than no at all. That's the spirit that's going on there at the moment, right? Do something rather than doing nothing is something which is, I wouldn't say introducing, but reinforcing the mindset in the drone ecosystem. Because why did we build Cochstedt? With the same idea in mind. You can't develop everything in a computer and then hope that it will work. You have to go out into the field and test it, and you have to be very iterative because it's such a complex new system. And so from that general approach, I think that's one of the founding ideas of Cochstedt, to bring that also into the drone ecosystem and enable that. So that is why now I would say we are so happy and proud that we have the shortening of these iterations possible through this geozone now. From the experience that we have during the last 4 and 5 years of people testing here, it is really that the people who go above the limits and they will crash their prototype will in the end really be faster than people who are not. And compared to if people develop their technology in that kind of environment, how does Germany or Europe, you could even say, as an ecosystem keep up with the speed of those developments? That's basically part of our research agenda, because for us, it's about not looking into what's been done today and can we optimize it a little bit. But for us, it's about, I would say, disruptive thinking about the technologies, but also issues of tomorrow and even further. And on the one hand, try to really already develop technologies that will counter that. And on the other hand, also gain what at DLR we call the ability to assess a certain overall system and architecture in terms of its interoperability, in terms of its efficacy, and so on and so forth.
One thing I understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, the center is not used just by DLR. So you're open to other institutional clients, commercial clients. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And the use cases that we see are almost exactly 50-50. So we have around 50% of our DLR internal projects and relating campaigns that are coming here. And the rest of the 50% is done by external users, customers, whatever you want to call it, right? And that's throughout all the ranges, right? So you have official government entities, you have your industry really as a technology development kind of thing. Then you have joint European or national funded projects that have the consortium coming here, sometimes for their, I'd say, really early on testing, sometimes also for their final demonstrations. Yeah. So we sometimes have events here which are not our own, but we already have 150 guests where the research projects demonstrate the technologies that they have developed and so on and so forth. So it's not really, we couldn't say what's a classical campaign in Cochstedt because it's different every time.
Understood.
And we are happy to say that since 2021, when we officially opened the testing here, that we had a growth of about 20% per year of days used. So now we are around 180 days of usage per year.
Wow. I think the year has 220-ish days?
Yeah.
Something
so we are not at 100%.
Okay.
And we can even go above 100% in the sense that we can have multiple campaigns here at the same time.
Yeah.
So we could achieve 500%.
Yeah, okay.
If we count it by companies, but yeah.
We are SpaceWatch.Global and we need a space angle on it. And modern drones rely heavily on space assets. So how is the center integrating GNSS, Galileo PRS, satellite communication links for resilient command and control, and Earth observation data for mapping, classification, mission planning, and space-based time services for synchronization? So can you give us a wrap-up on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny we talk now because a month and a half ago, we finished building up the team that is actually looking into space-based applications of drones and also using space technology to enable the drone ecosystem. We have 2 dedicated colleagues now who are in contact with the space world, I would say, to look into all of these parts that you just mentioned. So what we've already started is mostly in the realm of, I would say, communication and navigation technology, right? So we have, for example, an experimental GBAS station here. We have built together with the Galileo Competence Center in Oberpfaffenhofen a specific infrastructure to assess the quality of the GNSS signal at an airport, which is movable, right? So you can really assess the local quality and not just some quality you look up for a certain area.
That's why we have EGNOS.
Yes, and it's similar, but there's a twitch to it, which I can't tell you now because the project isn't quite finished. And now what we are looking into also is, for example, using Galileo services for U-Space, because you need a lot of information in U-Space to achieve this, I would say, automation that could be based on a space service rather than a redundant ground-based service. So that is something that we are starting to assess, hopefully within the follow-up project of our U-Space project that we are doing. And heaps of other things to go, right? So also in communications and navigations on the one hand, quantum technologies on the other hand, we are merging, I would say, those 2 worlds because they can really benefit from each other. It's not just the drone ecosystem benefiting from the space technologies, but it's also the development, also in the sense of increasing the speed of developing certain things using drones. For example, if you look at constellations, usually first time you actually see them is when they're in space. Now, with drones, you can simulate a miniaturized constellation and see whether all those kind of communications work and so on. And so there's a lot of angles where the space and the drone ecosystem meet synergetically, I have to add. Yeah.
Interesting. Germany is moving towards more sovereign, resilient, space-enabled solutions. How far are we depending still on external resources when it comes to drone technology? So how good is Germany? How strong is Germany in that?
I think we are better than everybody thinks we are, right? So there's a lot of hidden champions which are unknown. Currently, that's also a little bit by design, I have to say, because if certain companies are not known, it's easier for them to operate. Within the European ecosystem, I have to say, I think Germany is one of the leaders, definitely, from the industry side and also from the research side. Globally speaking, there are, I would say, different approaches. You can't really say who is better or who is developed their things further because people are just doing it differently. The US is still heavily relying on exemptions, for example, for implementing drone operations and drone technologies, which they are now putting into a more broader regulatory space. But that in Europe already happened 4 years ago. So we have a very good regulation where everybody can operate in. Technologically, that gives us a bit of a disadvantage because everybody has to adhere to it. And so we are not that quick into the first operations, but the second and third and fourth operations will be much quicker. China, completely different story because they are not taking the safety factors that much into account as we do or the Americans do. So they have established what they call low altitude economy in the Shenzhen area, where they do fly with drones in the city, but they don't mind if they fall down. In Germany or in Europe as a whole, completely unacceptable for the population, and therefore we don't do it, right? And there's a little bit going on everywhere. I think operationally, one could argue that we are not at the very forefront, but technologically, I would say there's hardly any nation that's better than we are.
Very interesting.
Outside of maybe consumer drones where everybody knows DJI and Parrot, but that's not the stuff that we're looking here.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about counter-drone capabilities or how we can protect ourselves. Does the center explicitly research counter-UAS technology, so sensor fusion, AI-based detection, neutralization concepts, and so on and so forth?
So I have to say it's not just the center because we are part of DLR, and at DLR we operate within a programmatic structure. So usually project is not run by one specific institute, as are we, for example, but by a multiple consortium of several DLR institutes. And so throughout all those institutes, we have very strong counter-UAS projects because we pool the resources from all those institutes. So we have communications and navigations, which is looking into jamming and spoofing. We have high frequency and radar technologies, which is self-explanatory. Then we have, I think they're called technological physics, but I don't know the actual name, which are looking into laser-based detection, for example. And then we have the more systematic institutes that are looking into drone technologies, hunter drones, for example, and which we have seen also in the tour. And so as DLR, yes, we are heavily involved in counter-UAS projects, also way before all this discussion began in Germany in terms of, are we up to date? We've been doing this for over 10 years, I would say. Also, even before Cochstedt. And I think the asset that now we as Cochstedt bring into the fold is that we have a platform where all those technologies can meet and interoperate without having to go through lengthy special application procedures and so on and so forth. Because to my knowledge, we are the only German or maybe even European airport, which is an international airport that has normal opening hours, but can during those opening hours do jamming, spoofing, laser shooting, and everything we want. And so I think that's the USP as Cochstedt we bring in.
Let's focus a bit on the dual use reality, so civil research, the security applications. As the head of the center, you navigate this boundary between civil research and security application potentially daily. How does the center manage dual use challenges in areas such as support of emergency services, protection of critical infrastructure, or data sharing for defense and security actors? And I know these are all heavy areas, but...
Yeah, the thing is, especially within the drone technologies, the security use case compared to the civilian use case, and I explicitly say security because it involves both the civilian and the military side, right? For us, they are very close together. As a test center, we see that whether I want to deliver, I don't know, something from the pharmacy to somebody, or I want to deliver munitions to the front line or something, the test case is almost identical. And therefore, the way we set up the test center, it's just usable for all those different scenarios and use cases. In the actual research perspective from the DLR side, there is a threshold in between them. But we can already see, especially in terms of Let's take, because we've talked about it, the counter-UAS application. Having a good digitized airspace, which is totally civilian side, and a good conspicuity, which is also totally civilian side, it helps the security case in thus far as that if I know all my cooperative partners, I can focus a lot more energy on really defending against the non-cooperative partners. There is also security gained in the super far off at first glance civilian applications. And therefore, for us, coming from both sides, either or, it's more like an add-on, right?
I think it's helped a lot to get one responsible entity for these things. We had these examples earlier of drones over military installations in Germany, drones over or near airports. So who's in charge when and can do what? And that's my hope, that the center also will pave the way for this operational understanding what has to be done and who's in charge, and not that we wait and say, I see it, but I can't do anything.
No, that's absolutely right, because sometimes it's not the challenge to have the technology ready, but to know, I would say, the possible faults in the interfaces between the people using the technology and making the decisions. And you hit it on the head.
I would like to come back to our position in a global market. So it seems that in many areas, such as drone technologies, Europe is falling behind global drone leaders. And you mentioned China, you mentioned the US, maybe also Turkey or whoever. So how do you position the new center strategically within Europe's effort to regain this sovereignty? Is that the collaboration with industry, technology transfer to startups, or even interfaces to EU initiatives?
Yeah, all of the above, really. Can't be one without the other.
Next question.
Yeah, because it happens on different levels and sometimes also in different domains. I would say in terms of being part of a increased incubation or maturization of technology, the center is still evolving. Like, we now have the geozone, so we can shorten the time span from idea to test by another 6 months, which is very good, and will help the entire ecosystem, because then if you translate that over, I would say, normally a 3-year period with 4 or 5 campaigns where you have to wait, you can see how much that will shorten up your development cycle. Makes us more responsive as a whole. On the other hand, yes, we have to involve, I would say, the regulators and or decision makers, because sometimes it's the European Commission, or sometimes it's the German government or the LBA. But they are very supportive. If you come to them not only with, why do you not enable this, but you come with a suggestion, as we did with the geozone, for example. And so for us, it's also a little bit of, I would say, creating a dialogue and taking up this role of moderator between certain stakeholders that have an inherent, I wouldn't say, problem of talking to each other, because they do talk, but one is waiting for the other, I would say. And therefore we, as in Cochstedt, but also DLR research as a whole, are like the bridge builders also in between these dialogues.
So what I take away from your answer is that you also integrate European actors. So if a Spanish company, a UK company wants to come to test. So
we already had people from all over Europe. We have people now coming in from Asia. And so we are internationally open, because I think that's the important part. You can't wall yourself off. If we want to build up a technology, we need to make all the resources available to their best abilities. And
open to friendly nations.
Yes, There's some people who would never even set foot on this area, but there's a couple of nations where,
I would say it was very impressive for me, who has never been here in Cochstedt before and hardly know of its existence, to see that the head of state was here, that you had representatives from the federal ministries, you had military people here. I think that's a great sign and shows the importance of what you built here. But you mentioned the 50% you worked with others today, or with having others testing here. So which are the actors that will collaborate most with the center? Is it the Ministry of Defense, Interior, Bundeswehr, police, or how do you call them, blue light entities, or even ESA, or all of the above again?
Yeah, really, because it oscillates, right? So we sometimes have a phase where we have a very strong industry usage, and then we have another phase a month later where we have very heavy blue light activities, for example. And so I would say being open for everyone has paid off, because everybody is also coming. We are now also, can't say too much more because of all the NDAs that we need to sign, right? But we are already also in contact with a space startup that is developing technology for airports and want to have a permanent testing facility here for their technology. And so there's really nothing that is not possible here. And therefore, because we try to make everything possible, we've also seen things that you wouldn't necessarily associate with drone testing.
I can fly my space plane from here as well. Take it off and land it here.
Yeah, we've got 3 kilometers of runway. Might do the trick, yeah.
Last question. So what is the typical look ahead? So your 10-year vision. So what is your vision for the center in a decade from now when I'm in retirement and get all my supplies by drones?
And I still have another 20 years to go.
I just want to thank you as a young generation.
You're most welcome. I think, not to paraphrase her too much, but I like what Anke Kaiser-Pizzala said in her statement when she was asked almost the same question. I think we are already, as you could see also by the guests that were here today, fairly well integrated into all of those ecosystems. But for me, it's very important that still grows. So I don't really know whether that will result in 10 years in this 500% of using user days necessarily, because sometimes there's campaigns which are security relevant, I would say. Sometimes it's from a broader perspective. Sometimes it's just for the company developing their technology, right? They do also have their own reasons that we need to have people here exclusively. So I wouldn't say 500% is the goal. We are almost at 100, right? So we are doing fine. But for me, it's about really becoming enabling part of the ecosystem in the sense that we keep building our abilities and capabilities to still foster what's being done in the ecosystem, because the drone technologies, as you said, they develop so rapidly that we need to, as a test center, not keep up. We need to still be ahead of the curve. And I think we have managed that so far, which is why now, especially in counter-UAS, Cochstedt is so relevant, because if we would not have the permits to use spoofing, jamming, lasers and so on, we wouldn't be the asset that we are to the blue light side, but also to the industry side. And therefore, for me, it's just we need to keep building that and need to keep being involved in, on the one hand, the decision making, but on the other hand, also in the technology development.
Thank you very much for the insights and good luck with the center.
Yeah, thank you so much.
If you have further questions, reach out to us at radio@SpaceWatch.Global. If you like these or other episodes of Space Café Radio, leave us a rating on your preferred podcast platform. It is the currency of today. And if you want to stay on the pulse of the space industry, please visit our website at www.SpaceWatch.Global and subscribe to our newsletters. And of course, don't forget to become a Space Watcher. I'm Torsten Kriening, publisher at SpaceWatch.Global, your independent perspective on space.